Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Austin Harness, and I had the honor of having Cody as a friend for nearly 30 years. The privilege of standing next to him at his wedding, experiencing stages of life, from wandering through the woods as 5-year-olds without a care in the world, to regularly discussing the joys and challenges of fatherhood. Tough and fearless is two of the best ways to describe Cody as a kid. We spent a lot of time riding dirt bikes, rolling down hills and barrels, and his dad built this massive wooden ramp when we were riding small little 80cc dirt bikes. Tim knows exactly what I'm talking about. I saw that ramp, and I said, there's no way. I'm not launching off that thing. As he was speeding up to the ramp, probably going faster than he should, he hits this massive, steeply sloped ramp, launches off of it, and his bike keeps going, and he fell off the back and landed elsewhere. He got up, brushed himself off, picked up the bike, and kept riding. That same toughness carried with him until he took his last breath. It's been really amazing to see the amount of support and recognition he and his family have received from the public and law enforcement community, most of whom did not know him personally. He would have wanted each person here today and everyone that has shown their support to know that they're appreciated. The law enforcement community is one of those few professions where the loss of one is felt by all. That has truly been demonstrated this past week with the presence of each officer here today, and especially to the motorcycle officers that have traveled in to escort him and his family in the rain and into the night. He would have wanted to be at the destination to shake each one of your hands and tell you thank you. Cody was not only a remarkable police officer, but more importantly, he was a loving husband and father. His greatest joy in life was his family. He poured his heart and soul into providing for them and ensuring their happiness and security. To his beloved wife, Danielle, and 2 children, know that Cody cherished you above all else. You were his greatest creation, his reason for being, and his source of strength and inspiration. Rest in peace, dear friend. Your courage and devotion will never be forgotten. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Matthew Ernest, one of Cody's dear friends. In 2010, I was returning from a deployment to find young Cody Allen. One of our good friends in common, Mike Riggett, had told Cody Allen that he was going to love me, we're going to get along great. I think it was basically our first interaction. He decided he hated me, and I didn't really think much of him. Everything that he did and how we did it was completely opposite of what I would do. Little did I know that that person would later become so important in my life. Some of those lifelong relationships don't happen very often. I just really thought that this one would last longer. It'd be Cody and I making fun of each other, smoking a cigar. Day in and day out, he served his family, his friends, and his community. He took his responsibilities very seriously. Cody was one of those cops that you wanted with you anytime there's a critical incident. He's extremely squared away, especially during a fight. there were several times that his old wrestling days they paid off. Cody envisioned a brighter future for himself and security for his family, which led him to apply to the Independence Police Department. Of course, whenever he left, he remained friends with everyone. Cody's that guy that he's everybody's buddy, and when he sees you, it's like he never left. As I took another career path, Cody kind of became my constant. If you knew Cody, you knew he had lots of good friends, and he could never keep a secret. I knew every time I shared something with him, inevitably he was going to have a conversation with someone that said, hey, don't tell Matt, or don't tell Matt that I said this, right? I shared something with him, and it was eventually going to make it back to Jordan White or Austin or Kyle or somebody. Cody valued his family above all. We talked about him moving closer so our kids could spend time together. He could coach Cy in wrestling. He'd always revert back to, well, my mom and dad would have to come, and I don't think they're ever going to leave Odessa. His decision to move a shift or apply to a specialized unit, it always revolved around the kids. How long is my mom going to have to watch them? Am I going to get to see Danielle at night? Am I going to be able to help with bedtime? Cody was such an amazing father. And he was a role model to my kids. He attended some of my kids' baseball games and wrestling tournaments. If you follow him on social media, you knew that his kids meant the most to him. They really wanted him to enjoy his passions of mountain biking, wrestling, camping, someday backpacking. He didn't have a lot of faith that Brody was going to be a wrestler, but he's pretty confident that Adley can hold her own. He was excited whenever he went to the Odessa State tournament. I remember he sat with Martin Studdard, and he said, man, I can't believe there's so many girls that are wrestling nowadays. This is awesome. Adley's going to love it. Cody was very forgiving and rarely held a grudge. If you made him mad, got him frustrated, you wronged him, given a little time, he'd forget about it and move to the future. I think that was one of his greatest qualities. It helped him remain loyal to his friends, his family, and especially Danielle. I think Cody would describe himself as just a guy doing his job. Sorry. What Cody did was an act that most people could never fathom, and that few achieve. In the truest definition of servant leadership, he sacrificed his life trying to save another. This act doesn't define Cody. These acts are a byproduct of Cody's character. Cody was a hero before he ever answered the call for service. And he'll remain a hero for time eternal. Thank you.
I'm Andrew Pennington. I didn't know Cody as Officer Cody, so I'm going to share some stories as just one of Cody's friends. I've known Cody my entire adult life. I met Cody the first class I attended at Blue River. I was talking to someone I knew from high school when the person sitting behind us decided to inject himself directly into our conversation. And within a few sentences, he managed to point out my love handles and said I could stand to hit the gym. I'm not sure if it was his brutal honesty or his slightly twisted sense of humor that meshed with mine, but by the end of that semester, Cody and I had started hanging out quite a bit. Fast forwarding into our mid-20s was probably the best time that I got to spend with Cody. For the better part of 2 years, on most Tuesdays, I'd load my dog Tucker up. I'd go over to Cody and Danielle's, where Tucker and Mox would play and Jules would govern the amount of fun they were allowed to have. Cody would have a workout plan ready, so we'd go downstairs to their gym where he'd kick my butt for a couple hours. Afterwards, when I was tired and the dogs were zonked, Cody and I would pour a little whiskey over ice. We were pretending to be bourbon connoisseurs, which turned into quite the bottle collection above their kitchen cabinets. Fast forwarding again, gets to an opportunity where I was able to help plan and host his bachelor party. And I know now might not be the best time to bring up a bachelor party, but if you take away the explosives, Cody's party was pretty tame. What his bachelor party did was paint a picture of either the kind of people that Cody surrounded himself with or the kind of character that it took to put up with him. That was a group of guys I'd be willing to hang out with any day. The next stop would be the wedding. It was an honor that Cody asked me to be one of his groomsmen. And as special as it was to share that moment with him and Danielle, looking back, something happened 2 months later that had a bigger impact on me personally. I was in a car accident that laid me up for a while. I couldn't drive or get around the house very well, and I could barely wash myself. But you'd be surprised what Cody could do with a loofah. Thank you for laughing at that. I was worried about that one. Cody never helped wash me. What Cody did do many times while I was laid up was he would get into his truck and drive an hour down to my house. He would spend 3 to 5 hours mowing and taking care of my property for me. He would drive an hour back home to use what time he had left on his day off to take care of his own stuff. Cody wasn't swimming in free time. He was enjoying his new marriage. He had a busy work schedule, and he had his own projects and property to take care of, but Cody never hesitated to sacrifice his own time to help a friend. The stories that I chose to tell today each pick out a characteristic that I loved about Cody. Cody was a talker. He didn't meet someone that stayed a stranger for very long. He was a healthy person to be around, and the more time I spent with Cody, the healthier I was, not only physically but mentally. He surrounded himself with good people, but most of all, he was absolutely selfless. This weekend, Cody had already passed, and I was sitting around my house trying to keep my mind off things when my phone rings. I see Danielle's name pop up and I just freeze. I had reached out through text, but I hadn't had the chance to talk to her yet, and I didn't know what I was going to say. I pick up the phone and I try my best to comfort her, but she stops me. And she says, "Andrew, I called to check up on you. I wanted to see how you're doing and how you're holding up." I was at a loss for words. Cody wasn't the only selfless person in their house. And the time that Cody got to walk this earth was made better the day that he met Danielle. And Danielle, I just want to thank you for being so good to my friend. I love you. I loved Cody. I will forever miss Cody, but I will never forget him. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Kyle Nixdorf, dear friends with Cody Allen. Today, as we gather to honor life of Cody Ray Allen, I am reminded of the profound impact he had on me and everyone else around him. Cody and I first crossed paths during a high school football scrimmage between our neighboring towns, Odessa and Wellington. It didn't take long for us to hit it off. I was drawn to his confidence, yet he remained remarkably humble. He had a great sense of humor and an infectious laugh that I will never forget. We quickly became close friends, and our bond extended to each other's families. Even as life took us on different paths, our friendship remained steadfast. Cody's unwavering dedication to become a police officer was a testament to his character. His discipline was evident from the very beginning, and I always admired his commitment to reaching his goals. Cody was not just a friend, he was a devoted husband to Danielle, a loving father, a cherished son, and a heroic officer. His selflessness knew no bounds, and his moral compass was unwavering. The monumental moments of our lives that we shared together, from standing by each other's side as groomsmen at our weddings to welcoming our firstborns in the world within a month of each other. Some might attribute them to destiny, but I firmly believe that a higher power guided our paths together. God's hand was unmistakably present in our friendship, weaving a bond that transcended mere chance. As my wife and I prepare to welcome our son to the world, I can only hope and pray to instill in him the same values of integrity, compassion, and service that defined Cody's life. In our grief, it is comforting to hold on to the belief that Cody is now in a better place, watching over us as a guardian angel. Though he may no longer be with us in the physical sense, his spirit lives on, guiding and protecting his loved ones from above.